Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Writing Visual Studio Extensions with Mads. That's me. And as usual, we have our good friend here and producer, James, with us today. Hello, James. How are you?
I'm back, baby. I'm back. You thought you could get rid of me, but you can't.
Yeah. So we had John last week substituting for James, who decided he had better things to do. Thank you, James.
But I also heard that it went absolutely spectacular. And I even thought about just giving John the whole show, to be honest with you. But he decided to take the day off, so I couldn't do that. So,
well, it turned out that last week's show was the most viewed show we've done so far in terms of live viewers. So I don't know if we can attribute that to John. I think so.
I mean, it's John Galloway. I don't know if you know. He's sort of a big deal.
So. He's kind of famous, right?
A little famous. I think so. I feel like on a scale of 1 to famous, who's more famous, your extensions or John Galloway? Probably I think your extensions. We have to count all of your downloads, compare it to John's Twitter followers, and then maybe we'll see.
Okay, well, that's not a competition. That doesn't count. We can't do that. That's weird. That's not apples to apples.
Well, it's number of users. I don't know. That's true. That's not apples to apples. That's true.
And speaking about apples, we're going to look at oranges today.
I'm excited. We have tons of oranges in my fridge. I can't wait to eat some.
Oh, yeah?
Yep.
Okay. Well,
I also did not amuse Mads right there, by the way, just so everyone knows. He's like, okay, on to the show.
Well, it's just weird. I don't think you're not supposed to put oranges in the fridge, are you?
Are you? I don't, here's the thing. You go to the grocery store and you buy all the produce and breads, and they're all out. And if you don't put them in the fridge, they go bad faster. So you put them in the fridge, like my avocados, I let sit out until they're like a good consistency, and then I put in. But I feel like you got to put them in the fridge. You don't put bananas in the fridge, but my tomatoes or tomatoes, my carrots, obviously, my apples, my oranges. Am I doing this wrong? I don't know.
I don't know. For me, an orange that you bite into that's cold is that's just not pleasant.
Oh, see, I love it.
Okay. Well, Well, that was very relevant, and but it actually is, because we are going to talk about oranges today. And so here's what happened. Let me give you a little bit of background. We're going to do an extension today called My Company. Okay, so I had this idea a long, long time ago. That was back when I was on the extensibility team. I had a conversation with someone who had written an extension internally for their company. I forget what the company is, and it doesn't really matter. It was an extension that he had written and shared among his colleagues that gave them sort of some help around what that company specifically did. And so I thought, okay, that's kind of interesting. He basically just collected a bunch of links to developer resources such as wikis, getting started guides, the build server, things that are relevant to the developers on your team in a development organization, right? In a big company, small company, whatever. And I'm like, that is a fantastic resource to have. Imagine that you're a new employee starting at a new team, and you're giving this one extension, and that basically gives you sort of the links and everything to everything that's relevant to the development of the solution you're working on, right? Or whatever it is that your team is doing. I thought that's a great experience. And it's also an interesting one because it has a unique set of challenges. It is an extension that I cannot build this extension for anyone else, right? You have to take the extension that we're building here and customize to your specific team. So this is an extension I'm going to build, which sole purpose is to live on GitHub so that other people can fork it and customize it to their company or their team. So it cannot go on the marketplace either. And in fact, probably it shouldn't go on the official marketplace, even if let's say that you think it's a good idea too, and you want to roll this out in your organization. You do not want to put this on the marketplace because it's not for everyone. It's just for you and your team, right? And you probably have a lot of internal links that wouldn't even resolve anyway if you're outside your VPN or something like that. So it doesn't make sense to do it on CorpNet, on the marketplace. So what if we can, so we probably need to host this extension on our own. So I think we need to look at that. And what happened was that yesterday I was in on a, it's not a podcast, but it's sort of a video user group thing called Coding After Dark. And I did an hour and a half of how to create the extension. So I've already created the base of the extension, and I go through in that. And James, if you can post that link in the chat to where you can find that. So it's on YouTube. It's an hour and a half. Coding After Work, it's called, with Jimmy and Jessica hosting, and it was great. I had a blast, and I basically go through like how to create an extension. What is an extension? So we take it all the way down to the very beginning, and then we kind of build this up and touch on some cool things. And that was, I consider that first half of this episode, where what we're doing right now is the second half. So let's move on to my screen here, James. So let's just look here. I got the extension loaded. So, up top here, it used to be that we could put our extensions up here. So I could have, my company could exist here between extensions and window. And that could be sort of a good access point. But Visual Studio 2019 does not allow that anymore. But we can use the standard toolbar, and check this out. I got an orange. That just happened to be the logo that I chose for this. Actually, in the video yesterday was a different one, and I changed that after the fact to be an orange because I wanted something colorful. And so the idea is that this is your company logo. Okay. So it opens up and it has links, even and keyboard shortcuts directly to things that are relevant to your team. And I want to show you why I wanted to go with a colorful orange. I'm going to go to Tools Options and change the theme to dark theme. Now, hang on. Before we do that, what happens to icons in Visual Studio when I change to a different theme? Well, what happens is that the colors of them invert. Because so what used to be like a bright color will now be a dark color. So it's sort of like the negative of a photo that happens when I switch between a light and a dark theme. So you would expect that this orange turns sort of an inverse of what orange is, so that it would work on a dark background. But let's see what happens. And no, that did not happen. So I'm going to show you how you can stop images from inverting if you don't want to. And typically like a logo, like your company logo, whatever, you probably don't want that to invert, right? You want that to stay the same, the real colors, so you don't get in trouble with marketing. I don't know, or your boss. So in all its simplicity, this is what the extension is, okay? And so if I click one of these things, build server, it opens on a different screen here, example.com, and then build server, just so we can see the difference between them, okay? Okay. So let's just close down. And let's look at the code. So this is, again, it's a very simple thing. I think we looked at this last time. We looked at how I can take logos in different sizes and ship them as a single moniker here by giving a GUID and an ID. And here we have all our source files. And check this out. Allow color inversion equals false. So that is how you stop that image from changing color. And James, just please feel free to interrupt me if there's some questions along the way here, if I miss it. I'm noticing that I just don't look down right now as much for some reason.
Oh, yeah. So I think that, there we go. I can turn myself on. There we go. I figured out how to use the StreamYard. So a few questions. Can you still have extensions in the main menu? Like, why did you choose to put it with an icon compared to like tools or something else?
You can put your extension in the main menu But by default, what will happen is that it will be reparented under the extensions menu.
Oh.
So if I had a command menu, called my company, it would now exist under the extensions top level menu. Now, you can then manually go in and say, the individual user of the extension can go in and say customize menu. And then over here, your extension will show up and you can say, no, I allow it to be a top level menu item on its own.
Mm-hmm.
But now but basically that's up to the individual user, and we can't, as extension authors, do this by default. So that's why I think I like the idea of a toolbar, but the more I think about it, I actually think I would want the toolbar thing anyway. First of all, it's smaller. It's not long as my company, which would be longer as a top level menu. It's just a single little icon. So there's an elegance to that. Another thing is that if you have a menu, so a menu is basically something with a flyout, like this one. This is an extension by Jan.
Jan is the one telling me that it's
right.
that it's not a question, it's a statement. But I turned it into a question. But that's
right. But notice here, and a menu cannot have an icon. See that? So whereas the thing we did before, if it's a menu like in a toolbar like that, it has the icon. So there's a certain elegance to it that I like. So I mean, whatever floats your boat, but I think this is the better solution personally.
I see. Yeah, that's good to know about the icon, because if it's what you see in those menus, right, is you see that the icon's for something that you press, but if it's something with a sub menu, then you don't get. That's fascinating. I don't write very many extensions, but yeah. Also, maybe if you have a really cool company logo, who doesn't want what manager and what boss doesn't want their company logo staring in their developers' faces?
I know. Imagine if you were the developer that would roll out an extension like that and put on all your colleagues' desktop, and the manager would look over their shoulder and they would say, "Oh, James did that."
Yeah, I love it.
Can you imagine that?
I'm ready for the dev one.
That's an instant pay raise, I feel like, right there, if you do that. Promotion, even. Okay.
Oh, really quick. Anil wants to know where that cool chair is from. I think we've talked about it before, but
that one?
Yeah, that one.
That is from Manhattan Home Design. Ooh. It's I wouldn't say it's a cheap knockoff of the Eames lounge chair. Yeah. But it is not the official one built by, is it Herman Miller, the factory Herman Miller that does the $5,000 version of it? It's not that.
I believe so.
Yeah.
Cool.
It's very comfortable. There was a footstool that comes along with it, but I never used it, so I ended up actually selling it on Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace. So, no. Good story, huh? So, all right. So then, you know about it. Did you just Google that, James, or did you know about it already?
No. I Google. I type fast. So
okay.
There you go. Right. Also, looks like you got some other Denmark fans in the house.
Whoop whoop. I don't have my little flag. Sorry.
Yeah, do you get to come? Well, they want to know if you ever get to go home and visit. I assume not right now.
Not right now. I haven't been home for over 2 years, and I haven't been to Denmark in over 2 years.
That's sad.
That's pretty sad. Actually, is it 3 years? It might be 3 years.
I may have been to Denmark more recently than you.
Yeah,
possible.
A lot of people have.
That's true.
Yeah. No, I got little kids, so traveling in long flights with little kids, it's like not fun. Okay, and I showed last time how we take those icons that we created, those image icons right here. So here's the GUID and our ID. And we basically put that into our command table right here. We register those. And now we can use those in our, we can now use those in our buttons, right? So super simple, super easy. And we now can control color inversion and also DPI resolution. So very cool. Okay. So let me show you how these commands works. So I have a button for each of the 3 things in the list. So 1, 2, 3 buttons. The first one has the company logo as the icon, right? And the 2 other ones just use the sort of icons that come from the known monikers collection in Visual Studio. And then I got my key bindings for some of them. That was kind of yesterday just to teach how to do that. I'm not sure that's needed for something like this. If you want to remove the key bindings, it's simple. Just delete these. But let's just keep them now. We can use this as a educational project as well, right? So here's what it is. My package class does really nothing. There's no auto load here, right? It just registers the 3 different command handlers. And they're all exactly the same. Almost. They have a URL. And then we hook up the event handler for when you click the button. And this is the event handler. Just starts the URL. So it means it just opens the URL in the default browser. Pretty simple, right? There's really nothing to it. But as I said, this is no ordinary extension because the whole purpose of this extension is for people to fork it and customize it. Yeah. So I feel like that this could be done a little bit smarter. So instead of having like, let's say I want to add a new button, I would have to go in here, copy this, add a new button, add a new ID here. Then I would have to come over to my Solution Explorer. I'll have to copy one of these existing commands, and modify that to the new URL and all that sort of stuff. And then I'll come into my package and then I have to register it here. And I think I would like to be able to omit the step where I need to customize my commands. So I think I'm going to have just one command handler that can handle it for everything. So let's do that. So I'm just going to copy this one and call it, we should call it a URL command. Something like that. And what I want to be able to do here is I want to be able to, very simple from my package file. Let me show you here. What I really want to do is to be able to register them like this. I'm going to make this up. Register. And then I can say, oh. And in here I would say, okay, the URL. And then my package IDs, the wiki, like this. And then I'll just have 3 of these. Because then in here, I can just say, register a new URL that matches this ID of the command. I hope that makes sense. So I don't have to create new command handlers every time. So I've been thinking, how can I create something that is a sort of a base? It's not even a base. It's just a class that dynamically registers command handlers, right? That's kind of what I want. So what I was thinking was, maybe I want to new up my URL command. And then, what is it? What is it exactly that I want? I want to new it up. So I want to say something like public static URL command. And it takes an async package. And I want to say, I need to give it a name. Create, let's say. So this is kind of a factory method. Is that the right word for this? I'm not sure. And so what I wanted to do was saying, okay, I want to do something like this. So I made a mistake. I should have done async and task off URL command. So I want to return a URL command. There we go. Create a command service. And then we can say, and then I just need to return new URL command. And we pass it in the command service. Generate constructor. Yeah. With fields or properties? No, with fields. I'm actually going to make this a private constructor like that. So what I can do now is, I should say create async. That's probably what he complains about. Yeah. Okay. So I want to create a new instance. And on that instance, I want to go in and say, so now basically I can go into my package file right here and say, so var handler equals URL command create this. Oh, and I should do async.
There's a question for you on this. You get a bunch of different parameters. Omar wants to know, can you get the login user to Visual Studio? Because like then you could actually maybe pass specific information about the company and that user and like do some special stuff there.
Oh my God. Yeah. No, you cannot. You can't. That's like you're like I'm locked in here with me up here.
Yeah, like a almost like
you know, there might be ways to do something, but I'm not sure that IVS identity. No.
Yeah, because I was saying if you use your company email, right? Imagine it was able to like make that connection, and then as a developer, you could be like, oh, when they click on this thing, do this thing, and pop up. And you could really make it personalized for your company and your user.
That's right.
It'd be creepy. It wouldn't be necessarily bad if you were, right? Like,
I don't know. I think it's one of those. I'm not sure that it's allowed to do any of that sort of stuff through the APIs. I would assume that you can do horrible things with it. Like you can steal information that you shouldn't be able to and stuff. So
yeah, it's almost better if you can't, because then I don't want to give away my personal identifiable information. That seems like that would be interesting though.
Absolutely. So handler dot. So here's what I want. I said something like register, right? So let's just register something. Do we use that? And let's just use that. So HTTPS, right? And you would use like your intranet or whatever. But we're just going to use example.com. Page equals wiki. So this is the one. And we're going to pass it. Package IDs, wiki. Okay, so this is the one I want. Should we do? Maybe we should do it the other way around. Is that prettier? Do this one first, I think. Yeah. So we say for this button, register this URL. So now we just need to register a thing. So here we go. String URL. Int wiki. No, it's not. I want an int command ID like that. So then I was thinking we could do something like this. So command service, exists up here, right? Command service is up there. So let's just, I prefer this different naming here. Menu command, what should we do there? CMD, right, is a command. This be var, please. Var. And then we're going to call execute with URL. We're going to take the wiki here is now our command ID. So execute needs to take string URL. We can delete our old method here. Was that really, could this be it? There's no way it's this simple, is it? I don't know. What is this, light mode? You know what? It's not light mode. It's blue theme, okay? Blue. And I think it's the best one when you're presenting. So there. That was my opinion on that. Okay. So are we doing this right? So we're creating a single instance of our URL command. URL command is kind of weird. Okay, well, let's just keep that name. So we create the command service from that.
Oh, Jan would like to know why you use prefixes that are old school. I agree.
Underscore?
Yeah, why you do that? Why you do that? I agree with Jan. Jan's right here. Underscores, they hurt my soul.
Oh,
they
okay.
hurt my soul. I mean, I guess you have to do this dot in that constructor, so I understand that.
So I really do not like this dot. That's just ugly to me.
And you love to name your parameters.
I'll give you one that's older school than this.
M.
Yes,
underscore.
exactly. Remember this M for member? Oh,
yeah, member. Yeah, that's what I used to do, and we used to do S underscore.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I worked at Canon, that's how we did that. It was very sad.
Canon, like the printer people?
Yeah, you work for Canon.
Oh, you got a Canon printer right now?
No, I mean the printer software I wrote was very large. So it's probably the size of your desk that you're on. They're reprographics printers, so they're huge printers that do blueprint printing. And what we used to create is a product that would do printer workflow management. So imagine you're building, let's say, a new building on campus, right? You have all those blueprints. They got to be precise. We had like a what you see is what you print type of thing. It's kind of like Outlook plus Photoshop for printing. It was crazy. That was my first job out of college. Everybody loves underscore. What is with Steve? Come on now. Jan, I like underscore too. No. Oh, geez.
Yeah, there you go.
Personal preference. You do you. You do whatever makes you happy in life. I'm just not going to write an underscore.
I mean, you can do underscore or you can be wrong.
So burn. Wow. Oh, no.
Okay. So my code cleanup doesn't work. Nothing happens. I had an error right before. Look at all the rules. I have enabled all the rules. Okay, so something broke. So how do there's like a keyboard shortcut for cleaning up my namespace, I forget, or using statements. RG. I haven't used that for so long. So what is this complaining about? Add read-only modifier. Yeah. What about this one? Explicit type. Okay.
No explicit types ever.
No. It's explicit types when it's not obvious what it is. That's the rule I got. But I'm actually going to do I here instead.
You can always hover over the var and it'll tell you exactly what it is, though.
I know.
No?
Yeah, no, that's true.
You know that I'm in a debate. I was seeing C#9, C#9 feature. You could do like, menu command, or you could do URL command equals new open close bracket. You don't have to do the whole full thing. Now I'm just like, I don't know which one I want to use. I want it to be shorter up front or shorter at the end. I don't know. It's confusing. Anyways, C#9, it's coming for you. There's a lot of people that are loving this conversation, by the way. A lot of good stuff in here. So
the underscore conversation?
Yes. Oh, can you give a recap really quick of what you're doing? Dolly wants to know.
Totally. So I was doing some cleanup. So here's what I'm doing. So it used to be when we're doing our own commands, we use, typically we have a command handler per command we're coding up, right? And so that's what I had over here. I had 3. So I had 3 commands listed, right? They're called buttons in the VSCT file. So this is my source of truth. These are the buttons that I'm adding, the commands I'm adding. And then I was registering initializing each of those commands in my package class. And I had a class for each of them that were all very much the same. It was just that the URL was different and the command ID was different. This is HR portal. This one here is the wiki. But other than that, they were exactly the same. So this is just silly. And so if the whole purpose here is to make it easier to modify the code, that's the purpose of this extension, is so that it's easy to modify the code, right? That's what makes this extension different. Then, fewer moving parts is better. So now I can actually take my old commands here and delete them. I no longer need them. And now I just have a single file that does whatever all those 3 ones did before, once I register things differently, like here. Use explicit. Handler is also the wrong name. What's the right name for this? It's not a command either. It's a command handler. It's a command factory. Is it a factory? I don't know. Is there a pattern? Who knows design patterns? Am I doing a pattern here? I feel like it's not. Definitely not a factory.
I mean, create async. It would be like URL command factory dot create async.
Yeah.
Right. Because it's a factory is making a new one every time. Right.
I just feel like if I do factory, I've done this before, then people that know their design patterns, they're going to be like, that's not a proper factory.
I don't know. I don't think that's how you spell it. Yeah, maybe it's a builder. Tofu says, well, a builder pattern would be like, can you build on? You'd be a builder.
I like that.
Builder.
Yeah, we're not really building anything though.
Builder to me reminds me of like Java, like building, and you like build. You would do like, blah 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 builder dot create dot with dot blah dot blah. Right. You can't really do that here. So
correct.
I don't know.
So, but then we can just go in here and we can call it factory. That's a URL factory, but I think it's okay. And then we can dot this in. Yeah. Does this make sense to people? Like why I think this is an important thing to do? Or is it just like, what the hell is he doing refactoring this? It's completely waste of time. Let me know in the comments. Builder is basically a fancy object initializer. Yeah. Isn't a factory that as well? I guess you don't have to initialize from a factory. Okay, let's just test that it still works. HR portal. Boom. It worked. Okay. So what we've done today is nothing short of amazing. Thank you, everybody. And I'm just going to commit this to the GitHubs. So what are we going to call this? We're going to call this refactored the command handlers into a factory / builder / initializer. No, like this, right? Boom. So we got less code and we have more, and it's also easier. Oh no, this wasn't saved. What was wrong with this? What did I change? Oh, nothing. Okay, well that's good then. Why do I call await on my async calls? Doesn't it do the same as sync calls one after one? Oh. What are you talking about? I'm not calling await on these. Before it had a wait in front of the initialize async for the individual commands when I had the individual commands, and you had to do that. But we're no longer doing that because the only async thing we need was to when we create async up here was to get the service, the command service right here.
Yeah, if you don't call await, right, you're just going to get back a task, and that task may not have been completed.
Yep.
That's the conundrum there. I mean, if you're coming from like JavaScript and it's like a promise, right? It's like you could do a continue with afterwards, but then you just want to make sure your sync context is correct. I still think that async await, anyone new to C# or just comes in and watching anything, still a little confusing, I think, for people. It's still confusing for me sometimes because I see a lot of people wanting to do .result all the time, especially in a UI app. That's bad news bears, right? All the time. And then also a lot of people like to do configure await false. And I just don't think that it's too confusing for me to even try to figure it out. But
I do that when I do like fire and forget. But if I need to do that in Visual Studio, I can fire and forget from Visual Studio in a smoother way. So if you ever need that, you can do file and forget.
That's a built-in function of a task.
That is part of the Visual Studio SDK. It gives you an extension method on top of a task that lets you file and forget. So it will basically make sure it will handle the error handling. So if somewhere in your async method that you're executing, it now runs on a background thread, right? If something explodes in there, then it doesn't take down Visual Studio. It's sort of any exceptions are like handled. So it's kind of a good. So use that. Always use that. Don't use configure await if it's because you use it for like a fire and forget scenario. Okay. So that was the first part. So, and here's the repo, by the way. Yeah, so you can go check it out. I need to put some screenshots in to show. Here's how to extend it and all these things. Here's how you modify it. We're gonna do something else. We're gonna go in here and we're gonna find another project. And why is that? Let's talk about this. So, James, can you zoom in on my face? Thank you. So this is what we're talking about, right? When you have an internal extension, you don't want to go on the marketplace. You want to host it yourself. And there's a couple of ways we can host it. So we can. So there's three options. There's the marketplace, but we kind of don't want to go there. We can, but it's weird for an internal extension. So let's not do that. Then we can use the v6gallery.com. So that's sort of the v6gallery.com. So that's a site that's hosted and operated by me. And you can see here's my company. That's the extension we're building here. So people use that for CI purposes. So whenever you commit code, it automatically builds everything and pushes up that version of the newly created v6 up to the v6gallery.com. And you can fork this and you can host this on your own server if you want to. It's completely open source. It's .NET Core 3.1, I believe. And very simple to deal with. And so, and it supports the CI scenario, right? So it's all described how to, maybe it's not all described, but if you want to fork it, you can do that. And then there's the third option, and that is, okay, what if you don't want that? That's overkill. Maybe you don't even want a web server. What if you want to set it up? So here's what you basically want is you want the marketplace feature where you have auto update. Right. So whenever you build a new version, you want your colleagues to get that new version completely automatically. So the marketplace has that. This website will give you that. And we're going to do that in the third way, which is what's called a private gallery. And so what is a private gallery? Let's find out. Private gallery creator. It's right here. I'm going to go to releases. Where's releases? Here. And I'm going to save this file on my desktop on the gallery. Okay, I'm just going to put it there. Put it there. Okay, so then I'm going to go into my Visual Studio here and open my bin folder and copy my extension right here, my v6. And I'm going to put that, if I can find it, gallery. Unconfirmed download. Oh, it's because it's an .exe and I have to say, keep. Are you sure? Yes, I'm somewhat sure. I mean, I wrote it, so I should trust it myself.
Marcel wants to know, can you host it on a file network share for your company and host a repository that way?
That's exactly what I'm going to show you right now. Yep, absolutely.
Well,
absolutely. So the website, the V6 Gallery website, and this particular .exe right here, it's just a .NET Framework project, by the way. And you can see here the source for this is, it's like pretty straightforward and very simple. That's all there is to it, these files. And so it can write a feed and can do different things. And I can parse the V6 manifest files to figure out like names and descriptions and IDs and stuff. And that is the exact same that you have here in this one as you do in the v6gallery.com. Okay. So you can just, if you want to do your own custom thing. You can just take all this. It's all Apache licensed, and so you can just take the code and do whatever you want with it. So let's just double click our exe file here in my folder. Oh, hang on. I guess thank you, Windows. Let's unblock this. So now I can run it. Okay. So it just runs, and look what what happened. Let me zoom in here. It gave me feed.xml and icons. And this is a hidden folder. And it has the icon in it, the PNG file. And this feed.xml, let's open it with Internet Explorer. Yeah, why not? So here's a feed. Okay. Now this feed right here contains a single extension. If I had multiple, and I think I do. Let's grab, where do I have one? Let's just grab another v6. Oh. Any v6 will do, no matter what. What? Have I really not built any of these? Twixter, for sure. There we go. So now I go in here and I run it again. I run the exe again right here. And I update my Internet Explorer. We can see I now have 2 entries in this feed. This is an XML format called Atom. You probably know this from blogs when you subscribe to either RSS or an Atom feed. So this is just Atom. And Visual Studio understands this format. Okay. So I can now take this file and I can put this on a network share or wherever I want it, where everyone can access it. And I'm going to go into Visual Studio. Change settings for extensions here. Let's do that. And I can now add a feed. So the name here is, let's call it local, right? Or no, actually, let's call it my company. And we're going to put it right there. Apply. Okay. So now when I go into the extensions dialog, my company shows up right here. And you can see my 2 extensions. I already have one of them installed. It knows that, even though, because I have it installed from the marketplace. So it doesn't matter how the extension got installed and from what source, it knows whether or not you have it installed or not. And it also doesn't matter if you have like which version. So now I have 2 sources right now. I have the Visual Studio Marketplace and I have my company. Whichever one of those have the highest version of my extension will win, basically. So you can't say only get updates from my company, the my company source right here, if it exists on more than one source. It's whichever one has the highest version that wins. Okay, so that just guarantees that you're always on the latest version, and that's kind of nice. Okay, so that's cool. Now the problem, of course, with this is that we don't want to go in and ask our users to go into the Visual Studio settings and automatically add or manually add this thing, right? So let's delete that. Let's not do that. See, now it's gone. It's no longer here. What we want to do instead is that we want to register that with our extension. So they just need to install our extension, and from that point on, they have everything they need. And the OpenV6 gallery, I think, will actually help us set up a gallery feed. Do I link to it from anywhere? I don't. Okay, then I will just go and find it. It is on. So if we go to the marketplace. No, we don't have to. I'll just go in here and search in my repos. I have one called gallery. I use it in several different ones. V6 gallery extension. Yes, so here's what I'm doing. I'm basically going to register that feed. So I'm going to create a new file in the root of my project here. Doesn't really matter where. feed.package.def. Package.def. Okay. And I'm going to grab what I already have right here. I'm going to paste this in here. And so now what was the URL of my feed here? So if I hold down Shift and right click a file, you can say copy as path shows up. In case you didn't know that little trick. And so let's paste that in here. Oh yeah, and it contains the quotes, which is kind of funny. And we're going to call this one My Company. Just like that. And the protocol here is Atom Feed. There are 3 protocols. There's Marketplace, which we can't use, right? There's only one Marketplace. So then there's Atom Feed, and then there's one called SharePoint. But I think we deprecated SharePoint like long ago. So you basically this is your one way of getting in there. So package def, and then we just need to register this file. First, we have to say that it is.
Hey, Matt, I'll be right back. Got to get the door.
Okay. So we're going to make sure that this package def file makes it into our v6 by setting include in v6 to true. We're then going to go to the v6 manifest file under assets, and we're going to add a new VS package, because a VS package is basically a package def file. It's a file on the file system. And see, it already knows that we have a package def file, and it offers that. So now let's try this, shall we? And see if it correctly added our My Company feed here to the experimental instance. Oh, okay, what do we have here? Is it possible that we create an extension which can take voice input from the user? Yes, it is, absolutely. Because it's just C#, so you can use the Windows APIs. I have one. I wrote an extension that did that. Where is it? Good question. It's called like Talk to Visual Studio or something. Voice commands. Voice commands. You see this? I wrote this a long time ago, in 2013. So yeah, I think you just basically hold down Alt-V like a keyboard shortcut, and then you just say a command, like build or format document, and then it'll do that. And it just uses the Windows APIs for speech recognition. There's nothing like fancy Azure Cognitive Services or anything like that. It's just okay. What was I doing? I was doing. Oh yeah, we were registering our feed. So let's go into our extension dialog. And see here, lo and behold, My Company is right here. And notice now that we're in the experimental instance that I have a check mark here on My Company, because that's the extension that got deployed into my experimental instance, right? So here I have both. So I now have a completely self-contained version. And I'm actually going to, just for the sake of the argument here, because I want to check this in, I'm going to go back to the v6 gallery. And I'm going to use, so here's another thing. When you have the v6 gallery, there's a gallery feed per extension. There's also a gallery feed per author. So if you click author, you can say here, gallery feed author. And that, so this is basically feed, right? Here we go. So I just want My Company. So I'm just going to copy this link and go to in here, and then I'll update it here. And then I need to add a comment here that says something about replace URL with any local UNC path, local UNC or URI path, right? Is that correct? Is that, yeah. So that's it, right? My Company, and then we can say, can you do that here? No, it has to be in the first line. So completely self-contained. And I'm going to just commit this. So add it. What do you call this? We're calling this gallery feed. Boom. There you have it. So all we need to do now to make this kind of a good solution is to update the README to have information about how to properly fork the repo. Here's basically the steps you need to do. Let's just type them up. Steps to customize. And we have, first thing we need to do is that we need to fork the repo. Then we need to modify, and add buttons in. It's called vs command table.cvsct. And this one we do like that. Then we need to modify and add URLs for the buttons in the my company package.cs. Okay, so this is kind of it, right? So updated README, and we're going to skip my CI step like that. Nothing to build. All right. So I think, everybody, that this is it. And if this is something you think is interesting for your team, your company, then I would love to hear about it. Reach out on Twitter or whatever. That would be kind of fun if you do something with it. Okay. Let's see here. This localhost extension server is so cool. Yeah.
And a back.
All right. There's one thing I forgot to mention probably about the private gallery. Here, the private gallery. So if you go to the private gallery creator, that's that exe file that I downloaded from the releases. It actually has full documentation on how to use it, but it has like a CLI API basically. So look at this. So you can change the name of the generated output. You can set it up to watch, so it's continuously running, and every time there's movement in that folder, it will just regenerate the feed. There's all sorts of different things that the community have added all these options. So yeah, latest don't. Yep. Anyway, you can read through all this. As you can see, I didn't have to do anything. So what you need to do is just run the exe file, and it will just redo the feed every time. So if you remove something and click it again, well, it will just redo it with whatever v6s are left. Okay. So your CI/CD step here could just be, when I'm done building, copy over my v6 file to this folder and then execute that exe file. Done. Right. So very, very simple way to hook this up as a CI/CD. All right, James, what's going on?
A few questions for you. This is from the very beginning. I think you wanted to touch on it. Yes, no, maybe so. From Steven about the future of VS extensions. I mean, this is a show about extensions.
Uh-huh. Yes, so the new blog post.
Yeah, from Leslie.
Yeah. So Leslie is the...
I don't even know. I didn't read it. Should have read it.
You could have, I guess.
Reading it right now.
So it's on devblogs. Microsoft.com/Visual Studio. You know, James, that I'm actually the content owner of this particular blog.
The entire
blog. Yeah.
Entire blog.
Mm-hmm. Maybe we should do some guest posts. I don't know. Do you think? Hey, let me just ask the audience before we get into this question. Would it be fun for you to write a guest blog post for the official Visual Studio blog? Let me know in the comments, and let's talk about this. Okay. So I totally selected the This is the one.
It's the first one. Well, it's because you saw your face right under it.
Yeah,
so
right.
Like,
Oh, am I that vain? I guess so. Okay. So, the future of Visual Studio Extension. So let's talk about this. So in the past X number of years, when we've had, can you make my picture larger? Because I don't think we can read this blog post anyway, right there. Yeah, thank you. I am that vain, I guess. Here's the answer. The answer is yes, I am that vain. So we have had these different events where we've invited people from the extension community to come to Microsoft, and usually it's because we have a build event like the conference, and so we have a day where we invite other people, the community, and we go through different topics, and it's usually a really good time. Last year we had the extensibility day. We were going to have this again this year, but of course COVID, so that didn't happen. But we ask questions like, what are your pain points? And again, we get sort of the same list of pain points. And I'll see if I can remember it off the top of my head. Visual Studio extensions are painful because finding the right API is hard. Like, where do you find the right interfaces, the right services to interact with? That's just not easy. There's no discoverability is what we call that. We have a discoverability problem. So that's one issue. The other one is, well, we have many ways of doing things. Let's say I want to write to the status bar. Well, I can use the DTE, but I could also use the IVS status bar interface. Okay, a service rather. And then there's other things like some is MEF and some is I have to use a package for that. And so there's many ways to skin a cat, as it were. And it's very confusing which is the right way, which is the slow way. Is there an async way of doing it that's better? That is like, how would you know? So that's another one. Documentation or lack thereof is another one that keeps coming up, of course. And then like, oh, it's old, it's archaic, it smells like COM. It's not sort of a modern .NET-y smooth API, right? To say the least. And then there's others like how do you unit test and integration test and stuff like that. But those are the ones that has to do with the API. So if we were to create a new API, it should address all those things, right? And so what happened was that we started looking into the whole Visual Studio family of products, started looking into basically hosting sort of your projects and your entire development environment on a separate machine, right? And fast forward, part of that is now what you might have heard of referred to as GitHub code spaces, right? So this idea that your project, your source code, your compilation, all the CPU you use for running unit tests and all that sort of stuff happens on a different machine. When it's code spaces, it's in the cloud, right? So it happens on a different machine in the cloud. So that means that if you want to interact with the file system from your extension, if you want to interact with the project system, with anything that no longer lives on the client machine, but lives on the server machine, let's call it client and server just makes it easier here, instead of calling it local and code spaces. We need to invent new APIs that are by default async, because I cannot ask for the project system to return me some hierarchy items, let's say some nodes in Solution Explorer, in a synchronous way, because that would just block that thread completely, right? And who knows how long it's going to take. When we don't know, we want to make sure that we are async by default. And those APIs are not async by default. Like today, we don't have any async APIs when it comes to the project system. They're all synchronous. So we knew that we had to come up with a way to make everything async. And we also knew that we want to make sure that and that I forgot to mention reliability and error handling as another thing that was problematic to extensions. That if you don't catch an exception, you could crash the entire Visual Studio process. So we wanted to make sure that if we do a new API, we also move it out of the Visual Studio process itself, so it can run in sort of its own container. So it won't interfere. So it can crash, and Visual Studio is not affected by it. It doesn't crash itself, and it potentially can just restart that extension, right? And so you have that resilience and async by default, so much less chance of any delays, what we call UI delays or hangs, and of course crashes. So any performance degradation, because it's all removed, it's all asynchronously done, and it's all in a separate process. Okay, so now we have these two. Now we have separate processes, and everything has to be async. Okay. So now we need to design an API that's super easy to use, right? Because we need to, at this point, we have to create a brand new API, not a DTE, not an, services like IVS status bar and other services like the one we just used, which was the the iMenu command service, for instance. It's not that. It's something brand new. Okay, so now we actually have the opportunity to do all the things that people have been asking for years, myself included, mind you. And so it's a really exciting thing that we can do this. It's a greenfield. Like basically, the extensibility team and the whole Visual Studio team actually gets to think about what would an extensibility model look like if we were to create one today. So the geek inside me is like super excited for this, because how often do you get to like rethink an entire big part of your app, right? And we get to do that now. And so it's going to take a while, because you can just imagine all these different components, these different services, these MEF component services, one by one has to be kind of converted, right? And until we have enough of the services that people use today the most converted to this new API, we can't really use the new API until that happens, if that makes sense, right? Because you can't really do anything. We have to have like critical mass, if you will, on the amount of services available on the new API before it really makes sense to have extenders do a lot of work on it. So, and that whole design takes a long time, and they're still working on it. And I haven't even seen it where they are right now. I think they've been very busy with just figuring out the infrastructure, because the complexity in making everything async and performant work is like pretty significant. But not only that, you can imagine you can have an extension that can live on the client machine, but you can also imagine installing an extension on the server machine. Now, how does that then work? Can a if you install it on the server, will the client automatically install the client pieces, or are they no longer needed? Or vice versa? How do you keep things in sync? What if you already have a client extension and now there's a server extension in a different version? How does that work? So you can imagine there's just a lot of infrastructure here that's challenging to get right from a design perspective, right? And so they're spending a lot of time like designing the basics right. I don't think they've even started looking at what the API will look like from what we would use as extenders. I don't think they're at that point yet. So this is not something that's coming like around the corner. And it's also not something that's going to break backwards compatibility. So whatever extensions you have now will continue to work. Where they won't work is when you're connected to code spaces. So for the people that are currently on the private preview of code spaces, you might have noticed that once you connect to a code space, all extensions are disabled when you're connected to the code space. Once you're like not connected, they're all enabled again, just fine. And so there's some dials that they're turning. So for instance, you will be able to say, no, my extensions is not touching any of those APIs. The APIs for the project system or the file system or something like that. So there's no reason why my extension shouldn't be loaded even when I'm connected to a code space, because I know it will work. And so that is happening here soon. So don't worry about that. So for instance, I have an extension for writing Markdown, and I think there's one feature in it that uses the file system, but I've tried it with code spaces, and it just doesn't. Actually doesn't fail when it can access the file system. It just nothing happens. So there's just a feature that doesn't exist, but all the other features work just fine because they don't rely on anything but what's in the text buffer in the editor on the client machine. And so that will be able to load just fine. And I as an extension author, can mark my extension saying this should work in a connected scenario when you're connected to a code space, even though it's not using any of that new API. So don't worry. I'm not worried. I got a lot of extensions that I would eventually have to rewrite, and I'm not worried about it because I don't have to rewrite them. The old APIs are not going anywhere. Your existing extension is not going anywhere for local scenarios. So when you open a local scenario, it's all going to be the same. Don't worry. Eventually, that new API will not just work for when you're connected to a code space, but it will also work locally. And you as an extension author does not have to care or know whether you're talking to a machine that's not the same as where the client Visual Studio is installed or not. And that's really powerful because everything is async. So you don't really care if there's a is there a web request? Is it talking over the HTTP or whatever with someone? HTTP is not the protocol they're using, I think. I don't actually know which protocol they're using. Or whether it's just a different process on the same machine, right? You don't care as an extension author. It's just async, and that's all you need to know. And it will just work everywhere. And so really, really good things are going to come out of this. And so I'm so excited to when they have something interesting. I hope that I can get a little bit involved with the design of the new API. And I'm just absolutely excited for when this is happening. But as I said, it's not anytime soon. Okay. Whether any idea on whether it will be a framework/API that will work with VS Code or VS for Mac? I don't know. That's a hard one. VS for Mac probably, because it's already sharing a huge amount of editor code with VS for Mac, and I could foresee how that could be expanded on through something like this. VS Code is a different beast altogether in that it actually runs it's a JavaScript app, right? So it runs on Node. I don't know interoperability there. I mean, yeah, that should work, I guess. Why not? The question is, is it desirable to do? I don't know. We should talk to Leslie and other people to figure that out, I guess, if it's desirable. But yeah. So the new API will also make it smoother for local work with Visual Studio. Yes, exactly. But I do want to stress the word future in Leslie's blog post. This is coming in the future. It is not around the corner. I think I skipped a few videos. Any video or resources you recommend for getting started in extension development? Yes. If you just Google getting started with the Visual Studio extension, you're going to find this blog, the Visual Studio blog, and that's your entry point. That's where I want to go. Or if, James, you want to share that link again from Coding After Work, the video that I did yesterday with Jimmy and Jessica from Coding After Work, that's a really good introduction to it as well. All right. What is John saying? Will there ever be a Visual Studio for Linux, or does Microsoft just not want to go there?
Got VS Code?
We got VS Code for Linux. I assume that you know that. And no, I don't think we're going to see Visual Studio for Linux anytime soon. It's not going to be the Visual Studio for Windows because I think it's too tied to Windows.
It's like Visual Studio for Mac is relatively inherently different in general. They share components, right? Obviously now, which is a lot of work, but yeah, there's differences there.
Can you compile VS for Mac to Linux? It's not that simple, I know, but is there a way that's closer probably, right? Than
Windows? Well, so VS for Mac has gone over a lot of changes. I'll put on my video so people can see my beautiful face. VS for Mac has gone over a lot of changes over the years since it first became VS for Mac. And now more than ever, the user interface is native Cocoa. So it's just native Mac controls, right? There used to be a lot of like GTK Sharp cross-platform stuff, and there still is, definitely, right? You can't it's pick your battles, right? But I would say the goal is to get it all to 100% native, just like VS on Windows is all WPF, right?
Right.
Yeah. So inherently you'd have to, build an another native UI while figuring out how to share those components across, and then figuring out exactly when, it'd be there. So yeah, I see, like, and even Jan, it's kind of a misnomer, right? Because like he's saying, like, isn't VS for Mac just a repurposed Xamarin Studio? I mean, the V1 3 years ago, maybe, but the amount of work that has gone into VS for Mac, the entire Roslyn engine, the entire code editor is exactly, I mean, it's astronomically different, like, especially under the hood, the perf, the, monitoring, just like it's dramatically different. I mean, we should really have someone from the team do like here's the new stuff. Because obviously people could say, well, wasn't Xamarin Studio just mono develop, rebranded? And it's like, well, even that Xamarin Studio itself was so different from mono develop, and then Visual Studio for Mac now is so different. Like, there's a lot of similarities, but the guts of it, right? The thing that runs the thing is inherently a lot different. I mean, especially now, like even like the hot reloading for Xamarin, like it's all the same tech under the hood. The adornments, right? I mean, it's exactly the same, which when you talk about the extension model, the idea is that, I think that was the idea when you're doing like source analyzers, all this stuff, and you're doing extensions. The idea was to make it a lot easier for things like mfractor or other big extensions that want to loop in to make it the same, Roslyn DOM, if you will, in a way. So.
And I know that, so if you go to the VS SDK samples repo, the way I do that, I just search VS SDK space samples on the interwebs, and that takes me to a GitHub repo. And there's an example of how you can write an extension that targets both VS Mac and VS for Windows. And it's editor extensions. I think it's IntelliSense. So it's completion, quick info, and signature help, and some things where those core components are shared because it's the same editor. It's exactly the same editor. What else? Here, will you create an example? I assume so do you mean an example of how to use that new API? If that is the question, then absolutely yes. This will be, I said documentation was one of the issues that we have today, right? As you probably all know very well, that there's not a lot of good and up-to-date documentation. So the cool thing about when it's something new like this is that for everything that we onboard, for every new service that gets converted to the new model and all that, it will be documented right then and there. And samples will be created. And so I have very high hopes. I hope I get to do some of the samples just because it's a great way to kind of learn the new APIs and also give feedback. So I hope that it's something I personally I can be involved with a little bit and get in early and maybe find some inconsistency or whatever. But the interesting thing is this is not an extension API in the same way that the DTE was sort of a friendly extension API. This is the exact same thing that everything inside Visual Studio itself will be using. So it's not just something that's, it's just for the extension community. It's for the Visual Studio team itself to use. And so that is a really good thing, because that means that when everyone is using it, including internal people are using it, that they want to keep it up to date. They want to make sure that everything is as simple to use as possible. And so there's a lot of good things about this. Do we have any other questions here, James?
I'm looking. I think we answered a lot of them as we went through. So
was that satisfying, my explanation of the future here? Because I couldn't really go into much detail, but was that okay? I know some people were a little worried, but
Yeah, I think so. I think, I've seen a lot of questions throughout today's stream and previous streams about, you kind of touched on it, like, can I use an extension from VS and VS Code to VS Code? But I would say that inherently those two applications are like different, right? Like if you have a menu, like where does it go, right? Like, ideally you could share some of the logic maybe, but yeah, maybe some of this work is thinking about sharing some stuff.
Yeah.
Future.
Okay.
So, nice. I
So
think it's
Alex has decided. That's great.
Yeah, that's good. I like that.
Oh, we both clicked it, so it disappeared. Yeah. So Jan says also, like, he created the Luminous code as sort of a wrapper around it. So you basically created your own API wrapper to make it easier and prettier, more discoverable. You kind of fixed that problem. But of course, the problem is maintaining that over time and have enough services and all that. I thought about doing this myself. I actually started it several times, and just the scope of it, like I think I got to doing settings and the status bar, and then it's like, oh dear, there's a lot here. If you go into Visual Studio, into your extension project, open a C# file in your extension project, and just type IVS and see how many services are in Visual Studio. So it's a humongous task.
A lot of great explanations. I think you did well. I think you did well there, Mads.
All right.
Cool.
Thank you, everybody. And should we? I will say, James, it was not John Galloway that was the key to last week's success, because today we have had the most viewers of any episode so far.
Nice. It must be you. It must be Mads.
Is it just like every week it's higher and higher? Maybe that's what it is.
Okay. Ideally, if you're doing it right.
Yeah, more people will find out, right?
Yeah.
And eventually stick around for next week so that they don't leave and never come back. It's like, never again.
Well, what are you talking about next week? Because people can go to live.net, and I added all the shows there for the next 2 weeks. What are you talking about next week?
You did?
Yeah.
Already?
Yeah, I'm on it. Come on now.
Did you do the one I created today? I mean,
Yeah.
So next week, we're talking about single file generators. This is exciting. This is the applications for single file generators are huge, and they're so fun to write, and they're just really nice. They're like, if you've never done this, and a lot of people have never done them, to be quite frank, because they are, I think maybe it's the documentation that's weird, but I figured out how to do it, and we're going to do it in a very simple way. I think I'm going to compile. I don't know exactly what I'm going to do, but what I'm thinking of. So for those of you who are web people, there's, you have HTML, JavaScript, and CSS that makes up sort of the web, right? And for CSS, there's a couple of flavors of CSS. There's a flavor called Less, and there's one called Sass. My favorite of those is Sass. And it just so happens that there's a Sass compiler that will compile my Sass into CSS that the browser can understand. And I was thinking of doing a single file generator such that when you edit a Sass file and you save it, it will immediately create a CSS file that's nested under it and keep that up to date. Just like when we synchronize the VSCT file and the v6 manifest file into C#, those things are done by single file generators. So that's my idea. And you can imagine you can use this for so many different things. For JSON files, for XML files, for anything you can parse, Markdown that you want to render into HTML, for instance, whatever it might be. They're easy and they're super powerful. And that's next week. And the following week, the week after that, I was thinking, I did that today. But which one was it? Do you remember?
It's like log something when something happens.
Right. So I went to the developer community. That's where people send their feedback to Visual Studio, send their free feature requests. And I found one that was about logging the time you work on a solution. So you can go back and say, how many hours or whatever have I worked on this solution? That's kind of fun, right?
Yeah, I like that. That's actually really cool. Also, you have about 25 suggestions from viewers in your planner.
You have. I've done a couple of them.
Mark them off.
a lot of them are like very complex, or they're like out of my. I will have to learn something radically different or new to do them. So I just hesitate a little bit because they require a lot of research. Some of them, and a lot of them we'll get to. Don't worry.
Also,
so keep the suggestions coming.
Also, Laka is waiting for that guitar solo. So one day.
Yeah, I don't know if I can do a solo. I can do like Jolene.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's just you, that is a solo.
Oh, good point. Yeah.
By definition.
I think Jolene or Highwayman. Highwayman is like my latest. That's really good. I never really listened much to it. Hey, so here's a pro tip. Can you do the pro tip thing? If you haven't already, go check out the song Highwayman by the Highwaymen. I knew it, but I never really listened to it. It's brilliant. Hot tip of the day. Pro tip. Yep.
Pro tip. That is I like that you also know that there's a banner that says pro tip. So that's good.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. You ready for this? Are you done?
I think so.
No. I don't know if there's any more questions. There's 200 people.
I know. This is crazy.
Mads is very happy. Mads thought that no one watched the show. And then.
So at what point, James? At what point? How many viewers do we need before we have to like get a proper studio?
I mean, don't you have a proper studio?
No, I don't. I should have a green screen at least.
No.
And like a 4K camera with like proper lighting and.
Yes, I would say proper lighting would be good. I could get you some Elgato key lights. I don't even have a fancy camera. I just have a GoPro. I was like, you know how you buy a GoPro and then you never use a GoPro?
No.
Yeah, well, that's what happened to me. Many people know that, okay? A lot of people know. You buy a GoPro. It's like you buy a gimbal, and you're like, oh, I'm going to buy this gimbal. If you buy a GoPro, you're never going to use the GoPro. You use it once, right? And you're like, oh, I'm not going to GoPro. But I have it, so it's like at least has HDMI out, like a camera. So this GoPro Hero 4 that I bought, sitting in a drawer, now it's my webcam. But you don't get that. I don't get that cool bokeh, right? That's there.
Right. Okay.
The fadey, zoomy stuff, but it looks pretty good. I think your camera. What camera are you using? C920 Brio.
No. This is I bought a camera when I was this was just before build, so we were already like a month or two into the whole lockdown thing, the pandemic, and so all webcams were sold out. Right, you couldn't buy a Logitech anywhere. Like they were just all sold out. The only one I could find was this Austrian cheap brand. It was like a cheaper, so it's called Aus Dumm, as I read it. But it's still better than what I got. But I think I need a Brio. Sayed just got a Brio, and he told me that was pretty awesome. And it has like some OBS features built in. You can. Ooh. I don't know what that means.
I'll show you where to get it in our zones. Now I have the wide angle here, so you can see. Because Janisky was saying that we need an LED light. Look at my one Hue light bulb just sitting there. It's not very good.
You have Hue?
I do have Hue, yeah.
Why do you have Hue?
Because you buy this stuff. Actually, I like almost have no smart anything in the house anymore. I'm over it. But I just have a few of them. The only reason I like a Hue light bulb, it doesn't matter what light bulb, is like you need one by your bedside so you can get into bed safely and then turn it off. You know what I mean? Or else because it's all dark and you're like, I'm gonna stumble and fall and you hurt yourself. There's lights, they can save your life. Just like a helmet. Remember when it's my bicycle helmet saved my life? It did. Yeah.
Okay.
There we go.
There you have it, folks. So buy a colored light bulb. You should put on a pro tip.
Oh, pro tip.
Pro tip: buy a colored light bulb so you don't fall in your bedroom.
It's very true. Very true. Yeah.
You could put it under the bed, like get light strips and then a motion sensor. So when you step out of the bed, you get like a accent lighting under the bed on your side of the bed.
That would be motion sensor. So it actually like
like here. That's a motion sensor.
Ooh, I like that. There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. All right.
Okay, everybody. That's it. We're losing people here by the second.
That's true. All right. Well, do your closeout.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, everybody, and I hope to see you again next time for the single file generators, which I'm looking forward to a lot because it's one of my favorite things to use, and I so rarely get to use them. So, see you there, and have a good weekend.